Welcome everyone to this online Columbia Soft training course, Introduction to WebTools. My name is Robin Ford. In a moment, Columbia Soft Product Manager Scott Zig will be joining us to lead today's training. But first, a few housekeeping items. We're presenting today's session in audio lecture mode. However, we encourage you to ask questions and participate. We'll have an opportunity for Q&A at the close of the session. Let me also mention that today's introductory training session is an additional value in your annual maintenance and support program. These introductory courses are a great way for self-starters to get some basic grounding, and for those who might be interested in more advanced training. To see the basics first, we also offer paid 3-day in-depth training classes and custom training programs as well. Now let's get started. Today, we'll focus on the optional WebTools module. And this session is appropriate for those who already own WebTools, as well as those who are thinking about buying the add-on, but first want to learn more about how remote access works in Document Locator. We'll get started with some WebTools basics and discuss some of the business benefits of remote access. And a big bonus for today, we'll get a sneak peek at what's new in WebTools version 5.3, which is in beta now and set to be released in just a few weeks. WebTools is an optional add-on module that allows for easy access to Document Locator systems via a browser interface that closely resembles the Windows-based UI. There are two options with WebTools, a full access module and a view and retrieve only module we call WebView. We're going to focus today's course on the full version of WebTools, but keep in mind a viewer version is also available. Now some basics about WebTools. The WebTools module is self-hosted, so you manage it on-site at your location. Unlike a software-as-a-service solution, it provides web-based access while still leaving you in control of the repository files. What are some reasons to use WebTools? One example is for employees who are traveling, working outside the office, or at satellite offices. They can access the same information as employees who are in the office. Another example is for customer or vendor access. Secure web access allows for an easy way to provide self-service access to information among people at multiple locations. People in the office no longer have to retrieve and send information, and everyone is connected with the same file, versions, notifications, and workflows. Now let me introduce Columbia Soft Product Manager Scott Zig, who will give us an introductory training on how to use WebTools. Scott?
Thank you, Robin. So today I'm going to start by covering a number of general usage and administrative topics using the beta release of Document Locator WebTools 5.3. For repository, we'll be modeling a sample construction company called Columbia Construction. Now I'm going to share my desktop. We'll give everybody a chance to have their screen refresh, and what they should see is my desktop. And I'm going to start by just logging into WebTools in its base configuration. And we'll see here that it's going to be pulling up Document Locator WebTools, and it comes up to a regular login screen. And you'll notice that there are no default values set up right here. We're going to get into that a little bit later. So I'm just going to log in. I'm going to log in with the CSS admin account and just go from there for now. So I'm going to put in my server name and my repository, which is the Columbia Construction repository, and hit login. In WebTools, what we've tried to do is give this the look and feel of an Explorer-style interface. Obviously, a lot of people coming into WebTools, this may be their first time. They may not have any specific training. They may be vendors or suppliers, remote outside companies, and so we wanted to provide them the ability to be able to use this with as much intuitive interface as possible. And so what we've done is we've designed basically a three-pane window where we've got the top up here, which is kind of what we call the toolbar, and from here you can see there are options to do stuff. There's some quick search stuff, address bar, and some other functions. We also have the tree side, which here is where you can navigate into Document Locator. And you'll notice it displays the tree, the folder stuff in a tree view, and it also contains standard tree file format here. So as you navigate in, this looks and feels very much like Windows Explorer. In the latest release of 5.3, you'll see there's been some changes to the interface. Namely up here, you'll see we've got a new column control up here where you can actually click drop-downs to control the sort order, or you can, as before, you can actually click on the columns to control the sort. You can also do things like resize. If we wanted the version column to be larger, we can do that. We could actually rearrange by dragging and dropping a column, and so we can move that stuff. And as we see, these settings are done on a kind of a per folder basis, and so it will retain that stuff as you navigate in and out. So you can set up your folders and see the stuff. And of course, like in this example, when I'm doing a hover over the file name, you can see it also puts it in the alt tag part so that you can see the full name of it. As with the thick client, there are things like the hover over dialog. If I put my mouse over the file, you can see I get a hover over dialog. I get the image, the name, and the profile property information. From there, I have this arrow, which is a context menu, and you can see that we have a series of options available, whether or not I can view the file, download, check out, and then some of the other options in here. So in this particular repository, you can see that we've got a construction company listed, and it has the different areas of the construction company, whether it be equipment that they're working with in their construction company, for example, the Caterpillar highway truck. And if I wanted to, I could just right-click and view this, and you'll see that it'll open it up inside the PDF viewer, Adobe Reader, and it'll give us a second to load. And so here you can see how it's using the native viewer on the computer for Adobe here to open this file. And so this is a big truck to use in the construction business. I'm going to close that down. What we've also done in this particular directory is for this company we've got projects, and so maybe we have active construction projects going on. And you can see as I navigate, what's interesting is some of these folders will have numbers by them, and those are the folders that actually contain files as compared to just subfolders. And so as we click into here, you'll see that thus far there really haven't been any files, but there's been a nice directory structure to kind of delineate where things are. And eventually I can get down into like my photographs directory, and I can see that I've got a series of images, and once again I can just kind of do the hover over, and I can see, okay, well here's them building a house. We can see the project name, the 134 Mountain Pass Way. Obviously all this metadata stuff is searchable. You'll also see in here that there are actually color stripes here, and as you highlight, it'll show you like which, as you navigate over, it shows you which row is highlighted. So you've got a white stripe and a blue stripe, and this just really helps as people scroll over to see all the different attributes associated with the file. What I want to do to start with is I'm actually going to navigate into our Employee Resources Safety folder, and this is where we're going to do some of the today's training. I've got a folder under here called Sample Subfolder. And what I want to do to start with is show you how you get documents into WebTools. WebTools and Document Locator, the Windows integrated client, share the same database. So if the files are added here or they're added into the thick client aspect, they will appear in both depending on the security. So let me show you some of the actions up here. What we do is we actually have a series of actions from this combo box here. First thing is we have an action called a detailed view. And what this does is it actually changes the display to include the metadata associated with the document and then any description or version notes. So this is a little bit more detailed way of seeing the documents if your columns aren't representing what you want to see. So I'm going to, normally it stays in list view mode, so I just want to show you that that was there. We also have the ability to create a new folder. So for example, if I wanted to create a new folder in Document Locator, I could just come in here and call this a test folder, and we'll give this a test folder description. And so we can say create folder. And just like with the thick client Document Locator, you can see how it'll create the folder and refresh itself so you can see the information. I'm going to go ahead and click inside of this test folder. And so I've navigated here, and you can see how it becomes bold on the left-hand side to kind of tell you where you're at in the tree. So I'm going to click down, and this time I want to give you an example of creating a new folder structure. This is a feature that was added, I believe, in 5.0 to build entire structures for new projects, etc. So in my case, I'm going to grab the new employee structure, and basically you'll see how it'll pop up and ask you for some variables. In this case, I just have to create a variable name. So I'll say employee 003. That'll be the employee's name. Say OK. And we'll see it'll refresh here. And it's created in a folder called employee 3. But as I navigate in, you'll see it also created a whole bunch of other folders. This is all part of the folder structure template package. So you can see where it created certifications and training, hire package, paycheck, personnel records. These things can also contain file templates, like if you had like new hire paperwork or something that you wanted to default in everyone's package so they could get them filled out. So you can see how you can do that directly through WebTools. The next thing on the list here is importing a file. So let's bring a file into Document Locator, and you'll notice on that drop-down a second ago that there are actually two import files for 5.3. The first one is very similar to what you're used to in the older versions of WebTools, where you physically browse out and go get a file. So let's go into the CFMA Pictures folder here, and let's just grab this file and say Open. And here you can fill out metadata information. So I've got a profile here, and I want to change this from construction to, let's say, marketing. And maybe there's a marketing type here of a photograph. So let me go grab that value here. Photograph. And then for the project, Columbia Construction, fine. I can also put in test description, test version notes I'd like. And I could even start a workflow, set up auto paths, auto policies, record policies, etc. I'm just going to go ahead and import it, and you'll see how it will upload the file, and then it'll bring the document into Document Locator. So that's very similar to what the existing product does today. Let me go to the next one here, and it's got Import Files Advanced. And this one is a new version of the import dialog that we've created, and it includes what's called an ActiveX controller. Basically, it's a real programming style interface versus just being HTML that's rendered on the screen. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to drag and drop some stuff into here. So I'm going to minimize my IE window. I'm going to open up the CFMA folder again, and let me move this around slightly here. What I can do now is I can actually go and grab multiple files, or I could do an entire folder structure if I want. I can literally just drop them on this pane. I know before, people, when they had to upload 50 files, that was a really cumbersome process because they would have to attach the individual files and go. With this method, we've got a single process where all the files get uploaded at once. So I can just hit import, and you'll see how it's importing and uploading the files as one big batch. And then as the screen refreshes, you can see all the different documents have displayed in here. And so it's a much easier way with 5.3 to get bulk files into the system. Let me navigate back to our test folder here, and our sample subfolder, and let's look at the Word document, because when it comes to making changes to documents and working with them, oftentimes they're going to be Word documents versus like pictures, for example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to left-click on this context menu here, and I want to talk about the different options that are in this menu. The first one is View. View is going to provide the file down to the system, and depending on the system's configuration, it'll either open it directly in Internet Explorer, or will ask you if you want to open or save it. In this case, I can just hit open, and we'll see that the file will launch here, and you can see how it opens it up in IE, but it's the Word version of Internet Explorer. So I'm going to close this down. And the next option here is download. And the reason why you've got a view and a download is sometimes files, such as a PDF, for example, when you say view, will open up directly into your viewer, and they're not that easy to like save to your computer if you wanted to like email it to somebody, for example. So we also have a download method, which in this case will look very similar, but you notice it automatically popped up this window, and if I hit open, instead of opening Internet Explorer, it actually opened up physical Word on my computer. So the difference is, am I showing an IE version of it, or am I physically copying this document to my computer to launch and run in a regular application? And so the download is pretty important. If people are trying to get copies of files and stuff, download's a great way to do it. And you'll notice I can actually multi-select in here and do a download. And what this will do is it'll actually take both files and put it in a zip and send it to me. So if I were to choose this option, for example, you can see it processing, and you can see how it gave me a zip file that I could save wherever I wanted to. And so this way I can bulk get down, files related to a project, for example. I'm just going to cancel out of that. The next thing on here is checkout. And I think this is probably the most confusing part of using WebTools, just because of the way HTML works. Let me do a checkout here. And what it'll do is it's going to ask me, do you want to check out this document? It gives you a chance to say no if you've selected that incorrectly. I do want to check it out. And what I want to do here is when it brings up the opener or save, I almost always want to do save. And the reason why is if I do open, because this is an internet file, it wants to put this off in some temporary internet folder where you really couldn't find if you wanted to. And so it's much easier to first save the file. And I know when I'm working on the web, if I'm just going to be making some changes, I'm probably just going to save this file off to my desktop. And once I do that, I can hit open, and you'll notice it'll open up back inside of Word. And now I can just come over here and make some changes. This is my third version of the document, and I would just save it like I was in normal Word and close out. And now you'll see it's got the red checkbox on it suggesting that this document is checked out. You can see I'm logged in as user CSS admin, and it shows that. So what I would do to check it back in, because this is an IE program, he doesn't exactly know where you saved the file, because we didn't install anything on your computer to be able to track all that stuff. So what you have to do is hit browse, and in my case, I'm going to go get the file that I want, open it, and hit continue. And what you'll see is it'll upload the file to the web and give you an opportunity to put in your version notes. So here, made changes for the training webinar. And I can say check in, and you'll see the screen refresh, and you'll notice now it's at version 3 of the document. So we've done the check-in, check-out stuff over the web. It's version of the document. And so now we can take advantage of some of these other options. For example, we can come down here and look at version history. So we can see that there are, in fact, 3 versions of the file. And you can see the different notes that I made. And once again, with the wider columns, you can adjust this and read it all. And this screen will actually resize a little bit, so you can adjust it so that it fits your screen so you can see the information. And you'll notice there are options to view the prior versions of the document if you have a security. So you really do have some of the full version control capabilities inside of Document Locator WebTools. What's also on here, of course, is the document log. And the document log is going to provide us a full history of the actions that have taken place on this document. And you can see that the file's been imported, it was checked in, checked out. You can see some of the actions that had a workflow up against it. So this basically provides a complete life cycle of the document. It's great for compliance purposes. And once again, this screen as well kind of resizes so you can see all the information nicely. And of course, you have the same kind of rich column control where you can adjust stuff, control the sorting, even show and hide different columns if they're driving you crazy. You can take them off the list. So let's go to the other options here. We have the ability to send a notification about this file. And one of the things that's different in 5.3 is we have a new way of selecting users to the system. So for example, if I wanted to send myself a user and I'm logged in as CSS admin or system administrator, I can just start typing and it will automatically provide me a drop-down list of the names that match what I've started typing. And so I could select system admin. What I can also do is come hit the add button, and I'll get our kind of advanced user selection dialog where maybe I want to search on department and I want to find the ones that are in engineering. And let's just go back. Sorry. You'll notice when I started typing engineering to do a find, it limited the people that had the Department of Engineer on here. And so let's say I also want to include project engineer. I could just say add selected, and he'll come down and be included on the list. And so I'm able to take advantage of things like their job titles, their manager, their department, their full names, so that I can narrow down the list when I have a whole lot of users. And you'll see the same kind of grid control logic works here, where you can adjust stuff, move stuff around as necessary, etc. So I'm going to say OK, and here I could put in my message body. This is a test, the test message for training, and say send, and we'll see that this thing will send off a notification for us. And what it does is it picks up the email address, etc., from the system and knows where to send it. What you'll see here is that actually I was sending it to myself, so it popped up what's called our hover over notification dialog saying, hey, you have a message. And if I go back into my email here, maybe do a send and receive here, yep, there it is, it popped in. I've got a message here, and it said, I've got a message about this file, and if I click on it, you can see my text here for the message. What's cool is this is one of the HTML configurable email messages where you can put your corporate logo, you could change colors of things, you can embed sentences and text. It's really nice and configurable. So you're able to personalize your business rules and experiences. So let's continue on. We have also in here the document notes. One of the things that's cool about Document Locator is the ability to take a note and say, while I agree with the content, I'm not sure the customer would appreciate this. So here's an example of a note that you might want to share on a document internally, but you certainly don't want to be inside the content of the document. I don't know if you've ever had a situation where somebody left history tracking on and there were some notes in there that maybe weren't designed to get out. This is a great way to basically keep a running thread of the documents. Made necessary changes to support the change in hours. You can keep a whole thread about this stuff, and you'll notice it puts it linearly, so the most recent document is first, and so you've got this kind of running thread about this, and so you have this whole history, but if you were to right-click and send this document as an email, for example, all that information is never going to go with it. So it's a really great way to just kind of internally communicate about stuff. So we have that in here. We have the ability to update documents profile. So if we decide this really isn't a safety document, maybe it's a contract, but it's also an easement. You can see here I could actually multi-select, for example, and hit OK. And as I do this here, and let's just do back to the hover over, you can see where document type's actually listed twice. And so if I were to search, I could hit this document based on a contract or an easement, because it actually applies to both. Lastly, what I want to do here is do a workflow request. So one of the things the Document Locator is used for quite a bit is doing workflow routing in the company. So when I want to start a workflow, I get to choose based on my security which workflows are available to me. And so I'm just going to do a basic approval workflow and say OK. And so I've started my workflow in WebTools, and you'll notice the Word document has a little gear on it. This means that it's in a workflow, and if I wait here a little bit, there's a good chance I'm also going to get a pop-up notification and an email related to this. So, okay, boom, we see the workflow notification, message has appeared, and if we go back into our email here, maybe we'll do send receive again, we'll see here in a second that an email will pop in. Here it goes, related to the workflow. So it says, you have a document pending your approval, please review. And of course, all this is configurable, even the text plus the whole format of the message. So I, as a user, could open up the email or the attachment here and directly go into Document Locator, or I can use like this WebTools link and launch the WebTools workflow vote dialog directly from here, which is very efficient to be able to stay within your Outlook and be able to approve this stuff. In my case, I'm just going to show you the the actual workflow node down here, as I navigate in, you'll see I have what's called a personal task, which means that there's a workflow assigned to me. And you'll see it here with its instance name and its document step type, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And what it's going to do is it's going to launch the workflow boat dialog. And we'll give it a chance to refresh here. And you'll see that it includes the documents associated with the workflow at the top. So I, as a user, can come and view the document associated with the workflow. I can read my step instructions. Please review the attached document and approve or decline based on the contents. And then lastly, I have my actions. Plus, I have some other tabs here that'll tell me who's currently assigned, what documents might be associated with this in a supporting manner, like maybe there's some related emails. And lastly, because I'm an administrator, I have the ability to maybe delegate this task or cancel the workflow, etc. I'm just going to go ahead and approve it and say this looks great. Say OK, and you'll notice how the workflow task goes away. So that's how easy it is to use WebTools. And of course, this is great for people who are traveling or your vendors and suppliers for remote access. Plus, it applies all the security stuff. So what I want to show you now is a little bit of customization or configuration that can be done kind of to map to your business processes. So I'm going to go ahead and close. I'm just going to go ahead and log out here. And this time what I want to do is I've made a separate landing page instead of the login.asp page here. I've created one that's designed for my business just as an example of a little bit of customization. So I'm going to call the CC for Columbia Construction and hit enter. And you'll notice here I've customized the HTML page to include their logo, and I've pre-filled in some information so that if the users don't have to worry about the server name or repository, they just got to put in their username and password. It's all about getting them into the system correctly and as fast as possible. Also up here, you'll notice there's different authentication types. For example, I've been using a SQL user, but I could come in as an NT user, for example, where literally I don't even have to put in my name or password. It'll figure it out based on how I'm logged into my computer. Or if I'm not really logged in that way, I can come in here and say, listen, my name is Scott, and I can go in using what would be my NT authentication had I logged in on my computer that way. So you have a couple different choices here. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and go back as a SQL user. I'm going to log in as Project Engineer 1, and I'm going to put in his password, and I'm going to log in. Now what I want you to notice is when I logged in as this account, it took me not to Document Locator, the root of documents, but to a search panel. See, some of the stuff that you can do is configure the user experience, like whether or not they could even go to the folder display, or whether or not, they're at the advanced search panel by default. Because a lot of times businesses really just want people to search. So I could come in here and say, show me all the JPEGs in the system. So I do star.jpg, and I can see I've got a bunch of documents, and I think, well, gosh, I really need one for a specific project. So let's go down to my project profile, and let's choose project name Mountain Pass Way. That's the house I'm interested in, and I'm just going to now hit search. And you'll see I brought back a whole bunch of documents. Wait a second, I really just want the JPEG. Search, and so now I'm going to come back with just the pictures. And so, like I said before, if we do the little hover over, you can see the document, and then I can get them down and blow them up to make them a little larger as I see fit. And so the search is here, and the same search panel exists in the Windows client. Obviously, it's a little different here just for the HTML style. One of the things that's cool here is with the new 5.3 is we have some date picker functionality where you can actually pick, from the calendar and choose different months, etc., and just kind of point and click versus trying to guess what format that you're trying to get the date into. So it'll do that stuff for you. And I'm sure now if I search on created, it's probably not going to bring me back anything because its dates don't match. But you can see how you can put in the parameters that you're looking for. Let me go back and just do a new search here, and let's talk about the page caching. Let's do actually star.folder where it doesn't equal that. So give me everything in a system that's not a folder. And what you can see if I scroll down here is we've got 6 pages worth of information. It's displaying 25 at a time of 134 items. Well, you know, I could sit here and I can go next, and you'll see how it will bring me up to page 2. I could just go, I want to go to page 5 directly, and you can see how it'll directly take us to page 5. Also, in this process, you could say, take me to the very end. So we've got like different kind of ways to navigate. And this is really a way to control how much data is going across the network. Because when you have thousands of these things, it's just a lot of data that would bring down, could really slow down the server and kind of the network stuff. And of course, the sorting works here as well. So as you sort, it will move the pages around accordingly. One of the things you can do here is you can actually say show all rows. And as long as you have a reasonable amount of rows, this will come back fairly quickly. And so now I'm actually showing all 134 in here. And what I can do at this point is say select all, for example, and you know, I could download the files. So there's a way to, you know, get access to the documents and be able to bulk perform actions against them. You can do that. The next thing I want to do is I'm actually going to close out of here, and I'm going to go back in, but this time I'm going to show you an auto login feature where I've got it also configured that if people go to the root of WebTools, you'll see it doesn't even prompt me to who I am. What I've done is I've created a public general access into WebTools. In this case, it's actually called WebView. This is a read-only version of WebTools where if I navigate in, you'll see my security is very limited. What I can see as a public user is all the public disclosures this company has made that I have rights to. And so you'll see, literally I see one folder. I don't see like the workflow nodes. I don't see the recycle bin nodes. All I see is what I have security access to. And so, for example, if I were to do a search on all the files in the whole system, you'll see this is my world. I can only see that there are 8 files in one folder. And so then I could go ahead and click on one of these, and I could view the document, and it'll go ahead and launch it in PDF format here. What you'll also see is I don't have checkout rights or anything like that. I literally, this is just Document Locator as a viewer. One more thing I'd like to discuss is this quick search up here. The advanced search is this whole search panel here where you can really narrow down your criteria. Up here, there's an options button, and this right here controls what the quick search goes against, and this is configurable for each user. So if I didn't want to do full text, I just want to do file name, you'll see how it'll remember that setting up here. And so I could say star.jpg, and you know, it'll quickly search on the files. And there are no JPEGs in here for my security, but if I come in here and do PDF, you'll see I'll get my documents. And so there's the quick search where you could be, you know, over here in the folder view and say, just show me, you know, the PDFs, and you can get the results back, or you can go into the more advanced search to be searching the stuff. So let me log out of this. And the next thing I want to do is go into the administration console. And so here I have to know the username and password. By default, it uses a username name generic, and so I haven't really changed that. So I'm going to log in. And what you see here in the WebTools administration is a way for you to kind of customize the experience of your installation. The first thing you can do up here is change the generic user account and or password to be what you would like. So we recommend you do that first thing. The second set of information here is the NT authentication stuff. Earlier I was showing how you could do current NT user or different NT user. But the truth is, when you're logging into a web application, you're not truly authenticated to the network. And so what this does is it allows us to use a SQL account to actually talk to SQL Server, but we do verify your username and password and account information with Active Directory before we ever let you get that far. So for people using NT authentication or LDAP Active Directory, you need to have in a username and password for a SQL account so it can actually contact the database. We have the ability to turn on and off whether or not the users can reset their own passwords. Obviously, that's just for the SQL accounts. We don't let them change their NT accounts inside of WebTools. But so you can control whether or not users will do that, and it'll give them an email that will basically reset their password for them. Lastly, when I automatically logged in as that public user, you can see where I had to actually configure the account information. I created an account called General Public and what repository information to log in. And so by doing that, I was able to directly get into WebTools. The next tab is the one that's probably most interesting to everybody, and this is how you can control the features of WebTools. Very basic stuff like whether or not you want the hover over box to display, whether or not you want to display the file counts on a per folder basis. Earlier I was talking about how on the tree side it would show you how many files are in there. Whether or not you want to enable or disable the alternating row color. So we allow you to have your experiences in here and customize them. Down here is where you set whether or not it starts off in a searches mode or folders mode, and whether or not you can even let them navigate in the system at all, or they have to search. So I'll let you go through the help manual on talking about each single one of these specific behaviors. But they're all in here for you to adjust and to test with. The last two tabs have to do with what we call IP mapping and domain mapping. What this means is oftentimes a web server, which will be running on IIS, Internet Information Services, is in what's called the DMZ, or the demilitarized zone. And basically what happens if you're trying to hit server name, like in my case, Scott Z, if you're in the DMZ, it can't translate that because it's not truly part of your network. And so you have the ability to set up mappings where instead of having the user enter an IP address, which is really cumbersome and they'll never remember, they could literally say, if they enter Scott Z, translate the IP address, bloody, 109, whatever. That way the users don't have to be familiar with that information. And the same thing is true with your LDAP controller and the domain controller, so that they don't have to know what a specific IP address is. So this concludes the product demonstration of the file training. Now I'm going to return to Robin and the PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Scott. Before we open the floor for questions, I want to mention again that Columbia Soft offers 3-day training courses and custom training. Feel free to contact me if you are interested. My contact information is on the screen. Also, a recording of today's session will be made available on the Document Locator Customer Forum. If you are not already a member of the forum, I encourage you to register. Now let's start the Q&A. You can submit a question using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the screen. We're going to try and respond to as many questions as possible, but if necessary, we may follow up directly on some questions after the close of the session. We'll now pause for a moment, then begin answering questions.
All right, so I've got my first question. The first one says, does WebTools allow a user to rename a file or a folder? At this point, no, but that is definitely on our enhancement request list. We have a whole bunch of features that could be brought in from the thick client that are on the list, and we're slowly doing that. If you notice, this latest release is all done in .NET, and so we spent a lot of time getting the navigation, the architecture correctly, and adding some new features. But there are some features that are on the blocks for some of the next service packs to go out. So the next question on here is WebView new? The ability and the licensing of WebView was I think 5.1, I don't know. It's been around for a little while. One of the things that also exists is that there was an enable and disable like check-in and check-out option. So if you wanted some people to have read-only access, you could configure the whole repository to do that. But basically, WebView is a kind of a less expensive licensing option where you can have people do that, and it's concurrent-based. So the next question says, tagging more than one property value on a document, the indexing, can that be done on the SICK client as well? Yes. The multi-select is available on the SICK client as well. We've worked very hard to put that in. That's been there probably a number of years now. The next question is, how best should I submit a feature request? Well, there's lots of different ways. Typically speaking, actually what I'd like to do is drive you to the forum. There's a way in the forum to talk about new feature requests, or you can simply send myself or Robin an email. I know Robin's email is up on the screen. We're happy to put those into the system and associate them with you guys. Next question says, what file types are viewable using WebTools viewers? Basically, Document Locator WebTools doesn't natively include any viewer technology. All the files are launched using the local PC's associated application based on the file type. However, there is an option through an add-on, Informative Graphics Brava Enterprise, which will natively support viewing like 100-plus different file formats and includes markups. And these could be Office files, CAD documents, and images. The next question says, I think they're tied together. It says, what plugins are required for new users, or is the ActiveX control for drag and drop, what is it? Effectively, what happens for the import advanced dialog, when a user first does it, what's going to happen is the OCX control is going to automatically copy across. It's a real small file that will get installed on their computer. So this is the first time in WebTools history that we've ever actually installed any files on the computer, and it's done real time. So when they try to access it, it'll self-update. All right, so my next question says, can SSL be configured to work with WebTools? SSL means Secure Socket Layer. It's an encryption format, and it encrypts the data to and from the IIS server. And the answer is yes. If you get yourself an SSL certificate from like VeriSign or whatever, you can configure IIS and WebTools to play together that way. So the next question says, is it possible to configure WebTools so that when checking out a document, it defaults to a location? Unfortunately, unless we do more of the ActiveX control that I was just referencing a minute ago, the answer is no. HTML doesn't support that. And so at this point, it's up to the user to make that decision. Although we certainly love to see some abilities to do that. We'd like to do it without doing our own forms of installation. It'd be nice if something like Silverlight or Flash would support that, but to date, I don't think that exists. So the next question says, can you discuss batch file uploads? Basically, with the new import dialog, actually both of them, support selecting multiple files. One of the differences between 5.2 and 5.3 is in both dialogs, the imports happen through a single click. What used to happen in 5.2 is, let's say I wanted to import 2 files. You go select one and you hit the attach button, and you have to wait for that file to go across the network bandwidth, and then you could select another file and attach it and wait for it to go across the network bandwidth, and then you could hit import. the latest release of this stuff, what happens is you could select 2, 3, 10 files or even a couple hundred, and what will happen is when you hit import, it does the upload at that point. So even if your bandwidth is kind of slow, it allows you to do an action and then kind of walk away and come back and have it be finished. I hope that answered the question. So the next question says, when does the new version come out? We're not exactly sure yet. We're still in the beta test, and luckily the results have been really good. So we're hoping fairly shortly, but we kind of want to hold our tongue just in case there's some issues that sneak up on us that we're not sure of. Because obviously getting the product right is the most important. All right, so the next question, it says, on the administration console, restricting notification to allowed users, does that use user settings or security? It actually uses security. Let me tell you about that feature. Basically what was happening is we have a lot of customers who are basically building portals with Document Locator WebTools, and so client A would get in to see their documents, and client B would get in to see their documents based on security. But what was kind of an oversight was that if you wanted to right-click on a document and say send a notification, you got to see all the client names associated. And so I'm pretty sure back in 5.2 we updated this so that you can set that option so that when you want to go to send a notification, the users have to have view rights to the file, else they won't show up in the notification list. And so for companies who are just sending stuff internally or whatever, this isn't a big deal, but for people who are doing external and they don't want client A to know client B is accessing the system, that's a very important feature, and it uses the security. The next question is a very good one. It says, I might have missed this, but does the hover over indicate that there are notes on the document? The answer is no. I know in the thick client it does. WebTools, we haven't got that feature in there, but it's a great idea, and I will add it to the enhancement request list.
At this time, we would like to thank everyone for attending today's introductory training session on WebTools. This concludes our session. Thank you, everyone.